Sadly, the church is in decline today.
If truth does not exist, we will not be able to live and function as civilized individuals in a society.
Students in the public education system at large of our nation are left with the impression God's irrelevant because he's never mentioned.
We sort of have national Alzheimer's. Here we are, the freest country that the world has ever seen, with more individual freedom and opportunity to choose what you want to do with your life and where you want to go to church. We have that, and we forgot how we got here.
So we're going to answer the question, why all the fuss?
Despite ever-increasing efforts to undermine the authority and accuracy of God's Word, the Bible stands firm.
Science and the Bible are inextricably linked.
We see evidence of incredible design.
God has made it incredibly clear.
Men, listen to me today. God has a calling on your life. Kids need you. Women need you. Our country needs fathers and responsible husbands today.
55 out of 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Bible-believing, church-attending Christians.
We have the longest ongoing constitutional republic in the history of the world.
The Western world was successful because it was built upon biblical values.
Well, I did atmospheric research for 6 years at the University of Washington, but then I was a weather forecaster in Great Falls for the National Weather Service. So I've been in the field of atmospheric science for almost 60 years. So this is right in my field directly. And to tell you the truth, I really don't like talking about this subject. I'd rather work on the flood and the ice age. That's what gets me going. But it's right in my field, and they asked me to do that. And there's similarities between this issue and the creation evolution issue. And if I don't forget, I will point some of these similarities out as we go. But another reason I dislike this area, there is so much misinformation going on that I can hardly stand reading about it. But since I read or keep up with about 50 earth science journals, I come across these articles in this every time I go to the library in Science, Nature, EOS, the Transaction of the American Geophysical Union. They're constantly bombarding us with this issue. So it's probably important for us as Christians to understand what's going on. And so anyway, the question is, are we responsible for the global warming? Why should believers care about global warming or environmental issues for that matter? Well, because it's God's world. He created it. And going back to Genesis, we are stewards of God's creation. And although we have dominion, we are to take care of his creation. So that's why we should be interested. We all should be an environmentalist. But there's always a danger because there's a lot of misinformation out there in the culture. So anyway, here's a quote about us that we need to take care of the garden or the earth now that we don't live in the Garden of Eden. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. We're to take care of the earth. So we should learn about it. But I'll tell you, this is some of the misinformation. I can gather all kinds of quotes like this. This was a quote by Obama's science czar. It was from World Magazine, 2009. He said this, Holdren was his name, but he affirmed one out of the mainstream position at his confirmation hearing by saying that 1 billion people could die by 2020 as a result of climate change. That's like so many of these doomsday predictions. Al Gore and his Inconvenient Truth. And also the guy that wrote that book, The Population Bomb, Paul Ehrlich, who just died here recently, who said the battle to feed the world will be over with in 1970. Some of these guys make some outlandish predictions that are failed constantly, but the culture buys into all this stuff still. Anyway, it kind of blows my mind about that. Here's another one. Global warming is the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced. It is the defining issue of our time. Really? More than World War I, World War II? Whew. Anyway, and then, of course, all the major news outlets have gathered on it. Newsweek, the Hot Zone, blizzards, floods, and hurricanes. Blame global warming. Blame global warming for a blizzard. And maybe a cold spell, too, while you're at it. And here's this one, the polar bear. Be very worried. The polar bear is the canary in the coal mine. And they always say, oh, the poor he's going to die out because of that sea ice is decreasing up there. Well, there's a lot more to that story, as I will get into. And Al Gore just recently made a prediction. Just came out just a few days ago. He told a Hollywood audience Thursday that a collapse of the Atlantic current system, that's the Gulf Stream current, that warms Europe, is a very real threat within the next 25 years. I think I missed something there. Anyway, he thinks it's going to stop. Reviving the disaster scenario depicted in the 2004 film, The Day After Tomorrow, on the 20th anniversary of his climate documentary, The Inconvenient Truth. Al Gore and his Inconvenient Truth. I can stop that every 30 seconds and show you the misinformation in his movie, which I've done. Anyway, now he's saying the Gulf Stream is going to quit. How many saw the movie The Day After Tomorrow? Yeah, quite a few. It's kind of entertaining, but it was totally, from a meteorological point of view, totally outlandish. Anyway, let's move on. All this hype about global warming is causing a lot of young people and maybe older people to have mental problems. I read this in EOS, which I get. It says a growing body of research links the impacts of climate change to adverse mental health outcomes such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and substance abuse. And another one said, half the teenagers in a newspaper poll believe that the world may end in their lifetime because of climate change. See what all the misinformation is doing to the culture? It's making us neurotic. And like a lot of doomsday predictions that never pan out, by the way, it's making a lot of people scared. And there's reasons for this I'll get into. Bill Gates actually backed away from it just recently. Have you heard that? He says in a few decades, cataclysmic climate change will decimate civilization. The evidence is all around us. Just look at all the heat waves and storms caused by rising global temperatures. Then he says, nothing matters more than limiting the rise in temperature. He says, fortunately for all of us, this view is wrong. But he was saying that not too long ago. He says we need to concentrate on getting people out of poverty. I think that's a real good goal. That's what he should focus in on more. And he got a lot of flack for that. It's like being in a gang. You can hardly get out of it. So back away, they kind of shoot their deserters. So anyway, all this misinformation, not only in this issue, but the creation evolution issue, the flood, the ice age, which I've worked on. My theme verse for research is examine everything carefully, hold fast to that which is good. Hold fast to God's word no matter what. But examine everything. We're to examine the data. We're not to take in this stuff and believe what you hear in the newspapers or on the TV news. Examine the data. That's what we should do, and learn to do that and get rid of the hype first. Don't jump to conclusions too quickly. I see people doing this all the time with hardly any evidence. Gather the facts first. We should be aware of bias. It's all over the place, but we should be as objective as possible as ourselves. That's how we should approach this issue. So I'm going to present what are the facts. First fact. First, there is no consensus that man is causing all global warming and we must act now to save the world. There's something going around saying 97% of scientists agree that they call it climate change now, because sometimes the climate isn't global warming, it's global cooling, which I will mention as we go. Anyway, there's no consent. 97%, that is total baloney. In fact, Arthur Robinson, and I checked his website before I came, he hasn't added anything more in 10 years, but up to 10 years, he had 31,487 scientists signed as of 2013 saying global warming not an immediate threat. And you can see the breakdown of PhDs, MS. I'm on that list, by the way. So there's a lot of scientists that disagree. And in the atmospheric sciences, there's some prominent atmospheric scientists, professors that disbelieve all this hype about global warming. Now, global warming is actually real, but there's a lot more to it. It's small. I want to point out Richard Lindzen, professor emeritus at MIT. He's been one of the strongest opponents of all this hype. Fred Singer is another. All these men are fairly prominent atmospheric scientists that are skeptical of this. And just recently, this man, who was a former undersecretary for science for the Obama administration, Stephen Koonin, came out with this book here in 2021, Unsettled, What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't, and Why It Matters. And by the way, he got a tremendous amount of flack as being a deserter from the narrative. And this is one thing that really stood out to me of why do these academics, professors buy into this narrative that we got to act now, the world is going to collapse in a few years? Now, here's one thing he said, and this kind of gives you insight of why. I know from experience that such institutional pressures are real because he is part of the institution. Whether you're working for the government, a corporation, or an NGO, there's a message to be adhered to. For academics, there's pressure to generate press and to secure funding through grants. There's also the matter of promotion and tenure, and there is peer pressure. More than a few climate contrarians, like Richard Lindzen, have suffered public opprobrium. Excuse my pronunciation. My English is not my strong suit. And diminished career prospects for publicizing data that doesn't support the broken climate meme. That's why they adhere to it. Job security, peer pressure. Another fact, carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have increased since about 1880. They are increasing, and there are greenhouse gases. Water vapor is the main greenhouse gas. It causes 75% of the greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide's not too much. Anyway, here's an old photo, but it's the same thing. It's been going up since, especially the end of World War II, but it was creeping up until end of World War II. Now fossil fuels are going up. Greenhouse gases are good for you. It's not air pollution. They're not bad. Water vapor is a major greenhouse gas, as I said. Carbon dioxide is minor. And if we did not have these greenhouse gases, we'd be over 60 degrees Fahrenheit colder. We need them. They're good for us. Another fact, global warming is real, but it's small. The question really is, how much global warming has there been, and is man responsible for it all? Well, you see some of the effects of global warming. Practically all the glaciers in the world are receding. And by the way, all the glaciers in the world advanced between 1400 and about 1880 because of the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age, they advanced. So we know there's natural processes of climate change. Before that, we had the medieval warm period. And this is at a time when man was not pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This is an old picture of the Arctic ice cap that I used to show. And you can see on the bottom there, the plot. And the sea ice has been decreasing. In 2007, it really went down. Anyway, I went and got more recent information, and 2007 is this fall right here. But since 2007, it's generally been steady state. It's been going up and down. It's been steady state since about 2007. So the ice hasn't really decreased any much more. And by the way, this minimum here is September of 2025. That's when you get the sea ice minimum. The way they talked about it says it was the 10th lowest sea ice min, the 10th lowest. They didn't tell you that it's been steady state for almost 20 years. They emphasized that, it's the 10th lowest. Oh, sounds bad. And this is the official global warming record by this group, the Climate Research Unit in England. Here's 1940. This is a bit hard to see. I should use a different diagram that emphasizes the vertical scale more, but global warming actually increased from 1910 to about 1945. We had global warming, and that was a time when carbon dioxide was not going up very much. And then we had actually global cooling for 30 years. And I think that they've kind of smoothed this out. I think it's a lot more global cooling than this. For 30 years, is global cooling from 1945 to 1975. Then it's been warming ever since. And there was a pause in the warming from about 2000 to about 2015. But you know, that pause has been smoothed out. I don't trust these guys. Has anyone heard of Climategate? Climategate showed that these guys are a lot of times dishonest, and they might be cooking the books. But anyway, here I've got 3 books about from the 1970s about the cooling, and they were saying the next ice age is coming. Because yes, the ice age cycle hasn't stopped. They believe in 50 ice ages in the last 2.6 million years, and we're still in that cycle. We're in an interglacial now called the Holocene. We're about ready to plunge back into a new ice age. So when they got that cooling, they jumped on it. Newsweek and all those magazines jumped on it. And I like how they say this: has the next ice age already begun? Can we survive it? More hysteria. Anyway, the warming is not as bad as you think, because it's been mainly at night. It's been in the winter and in the northern hemisphere mainly. And those records, those climate records, to get those curves from 1880 to the current, they're based on weather observations from all over the earth, but they have a lot of biases in them. Anyway, Roy Spencer says in this book, The Great Global Warming Blunder, our recent estimate is that as much as 50% of the warming measured over the land in the last 30 years could be spurious due to various indirect effects of economic growth, that is urban heat island effect, which they know about, and they take that out, only for the big cities, but not the little cities. And there's still a little bit of global warming in little cities like Missoula and Bozeman. So it's contaminating the record. And it was discovered by a man named Watt that many of these sensors that give you these long-term climate records are inappropriately positioned. And like this one right here from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And by the way, if they turn on that, they'd really have some global warming in the record. But anyway, they've corrected for all that. But there's another problem. When the Soviet Union fell, most of the rural stations in Asia dropped out. And that's usually where the cooler temperatures are. And when they dropped out, that would cause warming, because the cities are warmer than the rural areas. So that put a bias. And then then balloon and satellite observations show a lot less global warming than the surface. This curve on the bottom, you can't see the curve for the balloons, but it's about the same as the satellites, oscillating like they always do, but the trend is just a slow warming. Well, the surface indicates that, if you can believe it. So that's some of the biases in the long-term temperature records. And here's a kind of a lesson from Climategate. This was a situation where someone dumped 1,000 or more emails between these institutions that do these records. And you kind of get their mindset. They show that they were tremendously biased towards global warming, as you see in all the journals today. Critics have been suppressed. Freedom of information curtailed. Advocates of global warming have tried to eliminate the Little Ice Age and the medieval warm period. The medieval warm period was a time when the Vikings settled Greenland, and then they disappeared in the Little Ice Age. And there was a man, Michael Mann from Penn State University, who just smoothed out the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age. They were gone. And then the curve went like this from about the year 800, and then it went up like that. The recent global warming was called the hockey stick flap. And he was called on the carpet by many atmospheric scientists for doing that. And by the way, he's still around saying the same old stuff, but he's been called on the carpet for getting rid of the medieval warm period and the Little Ice Age. And the claimed warming of 1.6 degrees. Now that's old. It's 2.1 now. I forgot to update that. It's exaggerated more than Balling believes. Now, I didn't quote from Balling, but he thought that 0.2 to 0.3 Fahrenheit is due to instrument problems. Anyway, a lot of those temperature records are flawed, and they're flawed towards global warming. Fourth, there are natural cycles of climate change. I've mentioned a few of this, mainly from volcanism. Large volcanoes cool the land, especially in the summer. El Niños. And there's oceanographic changes, which are short-term, and effects from the sun, which are more long-term. These are features that affect the climate, generally in small ways. Now, here is an Atlantic Ocean oscillation called the Atlantic Meridional Oscillation. And you can see the years from 1860 where it oscillates towards the high end and the low end. And this causes changes in the temperature, especially for England. In the Pacific Ocean, we have the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. It oscillates maybe every 50 years, every 80, 100. They're still working it out, I believe. And these currents affect the atmosphere that affects the climate. So we have these effects. And we have effects on the sun. It's related to the sunspot cycle. Every 11 years, we have a lot of sunspots. But when we have a lot of sunspots, we have a lot more faculae, which are hot spots. And the hot spots predominate. And so you can, when there's a lot of sunspots, that means we're getting a little bit more solar radiation from the sun that affects the earth with high sunspot numbers. I might add that during the Little Ice Age, there was a period of 75 years called the Maunder Minimum, centered around 1700, I think, where they didn't detect hardly any sunspots at all. And this is one of the coolest periods of the Little Ice Age. And then here's this a plot from tree rings of the medieval warm period. And these are on the left is the scale in degrees centigrade. And the Little Ice Age, right in here, those are natural processes of climate change without man adding carbon dioxide, man having no effect. So there's natural processes in that temperature curves. In fact, you can do a correlation coefficient, as they call it, between the temperature, which is that blue line, which I told you since 1910 to about 1945 has been warming up. And then we had that cooling period down to 1975, and then it's been warming since. And so the CO2 concentration goes like this. It's not very well correlated with the actual temperature record. While the sunspot cycle length is pretty much correlated with it, indicating that the effects of the sun probably are more dominant for global warming or global cooling than carbon dioxide. In fact, in Physics Today, these two researchers said, we estimate that the sun could account for as much as 69% of the increase in the Earth's average temperature, depending on the TSI, which is total solar irradiance reconstruction used. They believe 69% of the global warming is due to natural effects. When I've studied all this, I wouldn't go that far. So in the book, the weather book, which I have, it's called the New Weather Book now. It's actually a homeschool course for all grades, young grades, middle school, and high school, divided up. They made me redo the book. I've always maintained, and it's in there for a whole chapter, that natural processes is probably 50% of global warming. I don't go 69%. I'm more conservative. I'm going to say half the global warming is due to natural processes. The other half is due to man adding greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane. And by the way, a lot of times you get this heavy snow areas with global warming, and it's causing a lot of protests. So anyway, blizzards and heavy snow, blame it on global warming. In fact, meteorologists were shy about saying any weather event was related to climate change. They used to stay away from that until 20 years ago. Now, almost every bad weather event is caused by climate change. They've totally reversed. And it's totally wrong that they do that, which I'll get into. I'm getting ahead of myself. And when you read all this stuff, which I read all kinds of it, there is a strong bias towards the harm of global warming, ignoring positive benefits. How many have heard about people dying in heat waves? Well, it's well known that more than 10 times the people die of cold than the heat. So if we have some global warming, we're going to save a lot of people. But a lot of them don't want that to happen either. CO2 enhances plant growth. We can have Arctic shipping with less sea ice and more agriculture further north, like in Canada. So there's positive benefits. And I belong to this committee. Montanans for global warming. In wintertime, I want a little global warming. And the cost to fight global warming is huge. And it's usually minimized by alarmists with little results likely. Bjorn Lomborg. How many have heard of Bjorn Lomborg? He was a radical environmentalist, and he was on Greenpeace until Julian Simon, a professor at the University of Maryland, said, since you're a statistician or a professor in Denmark, go look at the data. Look at the raw data. And guess what? He looked at the raw data and found out that he was wrong on almost everything he was propagating. Almost everything. And he wrote a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist, to start with. And then he wrote another book on global warming called Cool It. And he wrote another book, which I'll show the picture, called False Alarm. And he's, as an economist and a statistician, he's gone through ways how we can deal with any global warming and how much it's going to cost. Early on in 2007, he said, in estimating the cost of the Kyoto, that's the earlier one before the Paris Agreement, the largest assembly of the top macroeconomic models show an average cost of about $180 billion annually from 2008. That's what it'd take to fight global warming. And he shows that there's nothing we can do to really reverse what's happened. There's nothing. People got these exotic ideas of seeding the stratosphere, reflecting some of the sunlight back to space like volcanoes do as one way. There's lots of ideas out, but no matter how much, and that's what cost now it's more than $180 billion a year. We're not going to get anywhere, he says. So it's useless. What we should do is mitigate anything. Like if sea level's rising, which is maybe rising a few millimeters a year, islands that might get inundated, make barriers, mitigate. So that's what he says. And by the way, what they try to do is they double carbon dioxide in a computer model and see what the temperature changes in the future. And these computer models, which I've used as a weather forecaster, they're not very accurate. And but the alarmists take them seriously. For instance, here's some relationships. You got to get every variable correct, and they react non-linearly a lot of times. And you got to do it over grids, and there's a lot of processes between these grids that occur. And anyway, this is kind of how complicated some of these variables are, and we'll go over this for the next hour and explain everything. No, we're going to just... Clouds constitute the largest single source of uncertainty in climate predictions. Clouds, they can't get clouds right. They can't get ocean currents very right. And they miss the snow aging effect all through these models. Snow ages, when it's fresh snow, it reflects most of the sunlight back to space. As it ages, it absorbs more. If you get dust on it, it absorbs even more. But so it ages with time, and they would not account for this in these models. They don't get solar and infrared radiation correct, so they're flawed. But alarmists take them seriously. Anyway, this is kind of the latest. As of 2026, carbon dioxide has risen 50% since the pre-industrial times. 50%. Oh, I need to back up. In the models, when they double carbon dioxide, they get a temperature change that varies anywhere from 3 to 11 degrees Fahrenheit by doubling carbon dioxide. That's what they claim, these models claim. And by the way, there's dozens of models run all over the world by these institutions. Wow, 3 to 11 degrees. But nature's generally run it already. So let's go with the observations of nature. So 50% increase in carbon dioxide already. But methane has increased 166%. Luckily, methane is a lot less than carbon dioxide because it's a more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide has increased 25%. So when we add up all these greenhouse gases, we've almost, if we can put them in carbon dioxide equivalency units, we've essentially doubled carbon dioxide already. And the official temperature as of 2026 is warm 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit. But half of that could be, I believe, is due to natural processes. So with essentially a doubling of carbon dioxide, we've caused only about a 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in the global temperature. The effects are stronger over the poles, by the way, for various reasons. So even the most conservative estimate of 3 degrees Fahrenheit with the doubling of carbon dioxide is 3 times too much when we look at the observations. So this summarizes it. The models vary 3 to 11 degrees. So a doubling of carbon dioxide, essentially we've increased the temperature 1 degree Fahrenheit. That's not much. So we have plenty of time to do more research and find out more what's going on. This one, which I started to get into and backed away because I realized I was getting ahead of myself, claims of increased bad weather tremendously exaggerated. There's several books out on this. Here's an example of blaming weather disasters on global warming. Climate over land is changing rapidly, driving severe impacts through extreme heat, wildfires, drought, and flooding. All these are believed to be caused by climate change, they say. That was from Nature Geoscience, November 2024. I read about this stuff all the time now. Terrible. Anyway, Bjorn Longberry has a new book out, False Alarm: How Climate Change Panics Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. So that's his book. And in that, he will go through the statistics. Hurricanes are not increasing. I knew this from others' resources. There's no long-term increase in drought. Tornadoes are not increasing, and floods are not increasing. Nothing is changing really in the long term. Here's a quote. Because of the expanding bullseye effect, the property damage wrought by extreme weather is increasing. That's been increasing because people build in floodplains and along the coast of Florida where hurricanes can wipe out their house. But is extreme weather causing damage to human life? The answer is a resounding no. It's not increasing the death. It's increasing the damage because there's more structures to be damaged. So the average personal risk of dying in a climate-related disaster has actually declined by 99%. When you look at the people who died 100 years ago in climate disasters, today we've decreased the number dying by 99%. A lot of this is due to better weather reporting and forecasting, I might add. And in that book, he goes through tornadoes. That top one is the weak tornadoes, EF1, 1954 to 2014. It's generally steady state. And the stronger tornadoes, EF3 plus, they go up to 5. They're almost steady state too. So tornadoes aren't increasing. I can go through a lot more of this stuff, but it would take more time. Oh, the polar bears. A gal named Crockford, zoologist, wrote a book in 2019, The Polar Bear Catastrophe That Never Happened. They've actually increased 20% from 2005 to 2016. And here's one that has really been affecting our area. Forest fires have not increased since the late 1800s. This is the curve you naturally would find. It's hard to get anything but this. Notice how forest fires are increasing. But they don't talk about all those people that are deliberately setting forest fires and also poor forest management. But this is tricky statistics. It starts about 1983. This especially bothers me because this is the real curve. Stretched back to 1920, We had tremendous forest fires in the early 20th century. And by 1980, it was down to a pretty low level. And it's been increasing just a little comparatively. That's the real curve that you're not going to see. This is terrible. Oh, and this one here, why are they doing this? There's hidden agendas. I practically always, because I'm a scientist, focus in on the science, and I generally try to shy away from this stuff, but I can't help but finding this stuff. Here's one from this Christopher Horner, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Global Warming and Environmentalism. He says it is the perfect storm of demons and perils and the ideal scare campaign for those who would establish global governance. Jacques Chirac's word, he was the head of France at one time, in praise of the Kyoto Protocol, with strict control over corporate actions and individual behavior. Ooh. And here's one, Roger Pelkey Jr. in The Climate Fix. Undoubtedly, in some cases, the issue of climate change simply adds weight to actions that they would support for other reasons, such as expanding alternative energy or redistribution of wealth. Kind of seeing what's behind the scenes in all this. So in summary, there is no consensus on global warming. That 97% of scientists agree is just total baloney. Carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have increased. They have increased. So there's basis to say that man has caused some of the global warming. Global temperature rise is only 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit as of 2026, but it's probably exaggerated because of the effects in the temperature record being biased towards warming. Natural processes account for more than half global warming, and there's a strong bias towards harms. The cost to fight global warming is huge with little likely benefit. It would probably bankrupt every country on Earth. Computer models exaggerate temperature effects by doubling carbon dioxide. 100% increase in CO2 causes about 1.0 degrees Fahrenheit increase. That's man's part, minus natural processes. There are hidden agendas. There's no proof of stronger storms. In conclusion, we need more unbiased research, and we have time to do it. We don't have to act now to save the world. Anyway, if you want to know more about it, I have resources on this. This is rather old. I think it's 15 years old, and I was sick when I did it, but they made it pretty good. It's all the facts are there, but the numbers have changed some. That's all. Just a little more global warming, but that resource you can get. And in the weather book, and by the way, they may do the new weather book to make it a homeschool course, so it's got a different cover, and it goes through all aspects of weather, dangerous weather, and it has something on so-called climate change and past weather, so forth. And since I'm an advocate that it's geology where they put it over us on it. During the time of the Enlightenment, in the 1700s, it started with geology, throwing out Noah's flood, explaining all the sedimentary rocks by present processes over millions of years. And to get all those sedimentary rocks like in Grand Canyon, of course the Earth would be millions of years old. The Earth became old overnight back in the 1700s. Evolution didn't come around until the 1800s, middle 1800s. The millions of years came first. And in biology, I believe you can show the evolution's faults really easy, and I don't really get into it, hardly at all, because I'm a specialist in earth science. But I think it's geology, and it behooves us to learn about geology, because that's where they put it over on us, our kids and our grandkids. And Robert Carter and I wrote this Biblical Geology 101, basic geology to teach you some geology. It's not very detailed, so that you can see the evidence for the flood out there in the field for yourself. It's more impressive when you see it for yourself than when you read it in a book or I tell you about it. And because I'm so passionate about geology, we even said, well, here's a resource for young people, and adults like it too. Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb, Intelligent Grasshoppers, a cartoon style, teaching about geology of the flood. And 50 years of Ice Age research was put in here. Actually not, they had me cut it down 30%. I get wordy. Anyway, this is a lot of research projects. The Ice Age just wasn't, a lot of other things happened. The woolly mammoths in Siberia, ice cores, how the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheet grow, and a lot of other issues. What happened to the animals? How'd the animals survive? Lots of issues after the flood during the Ice Age. So it's generally in this, it can be in-depth in places. In general, it's a layman-friendly book. And I just came out with this just last year because they have claimed you can count 100,000 annual layers in the Greenland ice sheet to 100,000 years, just like counting the rings in a tree. What are you going to do with that when someone presents that to you? Or that the ice in Antarctica near the bottom is 800,000 years, vastly greater than the time scale of the flood. Well, there's a lot more to the story. That's what that resource is about. So also, we want to teach about the Ice Age and Neanderthal man, and in a fun storybook. So my wife and I wrote Life in the Great Ice Age and its sequel, focusing on what happened to the mammoths in the Ice Age. There are millions of mammoth skeletons buried in Siberia in the permafrost, by the way. How are we going to explain that? What happened to them? They were all over the northern hemisphere, and they died out. 2/3 of animals over 100 pounds died out at the end of the Ice Age. Like not only woolly mammoths, mastodons, ground sloth, saber-toothed tigers. Aren't we glad that they're not around anymore? They were all over North America. And the millions of years is actually a more threatening concept to Christians than even evolution, as we find out from polls. This is one of the main pieces of data, the millions of years, that drive young people away from the church. This is the seeds that are taught in public school. And a pastor came up to me at a pastor's conference right here in Missoula, actually, and said, I want to know about what's behind all this stuff. And what you have out now is too complicated, even the so-called layman's book, and he was right. So this is why I wrote a resource on dating for a layman with no science background. That was the goal. In fact, this is, I think, the simplest book with showing the data of millions of years. It has a section on why do we have millions of years? Why? And secondly, what does the Bible say? Third, what does science say? And what is the evidence for a lot younger Earth? Carbon-14 in diamonds that Bruce Malone mentioned, that's in there. And also the helium leakage or diffusion from zircon crystals. So this book just came out. Anyway, I think that's in the end of some of my resources. I have a lot more resources out there after 50 years of research. I'm a specialty speaker, and I've been learning to fill in gaps here and there in our knowledge in various areas of science. Anyway, I want to leave you with this. Your faith should not rest in the wisdom of men, but on the power of God. Amen. Thank you.